Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tab onto the first slide. So today we're here to talk about financial matters. It's not going to be Paul Sheppard. It's going to be Dean Mayer, who'll be joining me shortly, who is, I assure you, a chartered accountant himself and an advisor to small businesses. So, and as well as an owner of small businesses. So he is very knowledgeable about the subject. So I'm not necessarily shortchanging you. Any questions that we have that we can't answer today for any reason, and we say this with all of our webinars, we will go away and get the answers, and we will let you know those as well, because there's some stuff that is still not necessarily known in detail about some of the schemes, even now, that the government has launched to help you. So this session really is for trainers to gain more knowledge of the financial support and guidance open to you at this time, but also importantly, as we start to see a little bit of a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel of this crisis and the possibility of returning to work and generating income again, what is it that we can think about? Not necessarily when you first return to work. This is about the point in which you will start to hopefully restore your level of income. What is it you can do to future-proof your finances against further risk in the future? And if you were to take this course alongside the webinar that we did on risk management, this pandemic has been completely unprecedented and taken whole swathes of the working population out in one respect. But the kind of risks that you face in everyday life as a small business are so, kind of important to be aware of, because they can be the risks that take away your income or your livelihood as well. So this whole crisis has made us all more aware of our vulnerability as people operating small businesses, and what is it we can do to hedge against those risks in the future. Okay, so undoubtedly, the financial impact of COVID-19 has been very deep. It's been one of the hardest hit industries. We've had riding schools, driving schools effectively closed since testing ceased. It's very hard, even at this moment in time, to know when you can go back to training. We're not necessarily able to give you any definitive answers on that at this moment in time. Earnings are nil or significantly reduced since lockdown started, unless you're one of the fortunate ones who's been able to get either a part-time job or has been able to switch into doing some level of key worker or fleet training where training is still ongoing. In this presentation, we're going to look in a bit more detail and take the questions that I know that many people have about the financial support packages that are available from government, but also what other strategies you guys can employ, or at least attempt to employ, because it doesn't fit everybody, to kind of minimize your outgoings and try and hedge off some of the financial issues that you've got, to be able to get back to a point of earning again, but try and not do that without too much debt. So I have my co-presenter with me. Say good morning, Dean.
Morning, everybody. Dean Mayer here.
Yeah, so as I said, Dean's going to help me answer some of the questions today because he's far more qualified than I am. So in summary, the key elements of the government support scheme that apply to our sector are things like the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme. The scheme has opened on the 13th of May, so that's tomorrow in terms of when they will start the applications process in earnest. HMRC has now managed to build a largely online system to be able to deal with this processing. So that's actually brought the date from which they think they can start making these payments back from being into June originally to now they're saying that some individuals will start to receive in about in June. So it's gone back from June to about the 25th of May that they think that most people are going to start receiving their payments. Or it will be, if you are given a date from which your grant will be processed that is later in May, the payment, it is stated, will be made within 6 working days after your claim. This is a temporary scheme, helping you claim up to 80% of your trading profits for the 3-month period from March to June 2020. It uses an average of your trading profit over the last 3 years or less if available. Maximum claim amount is 7,500. So that 7,500 is for the 3 months that the payment will initially make a payment for. It will be paid in a single installments, and it will be subject to income tax and national insurance claims as well. Dean, is there anything else you want to add, being the accountancy head, to this?
I suppose what that scheme is trying to do is to offer the similar level of income protection that the employed people are receiving, whether for employees you can get up to 80% of your salary, up to £2,500 per month. So it's really offering self-employed people the same level of cover as individuals who are PAYE, so equalising the two types of employment.
Has anybody got any specific burning questions up front about the self-employment scheme in itself? Because I know this is the scheme that is most applicable to ADIs, but in itself, we have the situation that a lot of people are struggling with their eligibility. Okay, just got a question. I'm just pausing for questions now, so
feel free to send them in. Carly figures the technology.
So yes, Andrew, you've got a very relevant question. Is it going to be for 3 months only? We're looking at it at the moment, and we're trying to second guess what they will do about this. It's our viewpoint that it will only be for 3 months, because as we move on to in a moment, we believe, and this is obviously only our personal opinion, that the government will actually push self-employed individuals more to the bounce back loans. So the argument might be, why are you stopping the scheme? You've given us no other means of supporting ourselves. They'll make two arguments. They'll make one argument that actually they're now encouraging a lot of people to return to work, which I know we will cover in a moment, doesn't necessarily apply to our sector. And the fallback position they will take on that, and we're being brutally honest, so we don't necessarily build people's hopes up here, is that people can use the bounce back loans from here on, and that's why I think there's a viewpoint they might not do it for much longer.
Well, it's unclear really. I mean, at the moment, this is the period that's available, but there's speculation today that the Chancellor is going to extend the furloughing scheme, which is the equivalent for PAYE employees, for another 3 months to the end of September, but reduce the amount to 60% of coverage. So if he wants to equalise the two offers and keep the same benefit for each type of employee, then logically you would extend this scheme out for another 3 months, but reduce the amount that's paid. So it's not sure which way it will go. It could be the end of it at the end of June. However, if he does extend the furlough scheme till the end of September at a reduced rate, there is a logic that he may also extend this scheme, but at a reduced rate going forward. So
yeah. So for those of you who are not aware,
we should find out probably in the next few days.
Yeah. I mean, the Chancellor is going to make an announcement about the furloughing scheme this afternoon, I believe, and there is an anticipation that announcement will be that he may continue it to the end of July, but September, but actually reduce the amount paid to 60%. And so it could be to keep the equality in terms of supporting self-employed and PAYE. He offers some level of this income support scheme, but again, he cuts the amount of support that he actually offers here. So these are the speculative
tune
things.
In today and listen to him, see what he has to say.
We would really recommend that people keep a close eye. Obviously, we watch the Chancellor's broadcast each time, and then we try and get an email out to you disseminating that information as soon as we can. But do tune in and think about how that affects you. I'm going to take some specific questions. You can actually read about the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme in full on the gov.uk website, and there's also a special website called Business Support .co.uk that has been set up to deal with all these questions. Another place that I'd push you to for more information about the scheme, in essence, is moneysavingexpert.com, because they've specially tailored their advice as well for the small business owner. What I'm going to do here is, because we wanted this to be more of an interactive session, is basically take more of the questions that we're getting coming through now. So I'm going to throw one over to Eugene on this one here, because I know this is an area that people had lots of questions. Ray's asking, he's been trading for 3 years. Year 1 was a loss. Year 2 was a small profit. Year 3 was a good profit. I suppose what you're asking here, Ray, is how are they going to calculate your payment, given you've got a variety in how you operate it?
From what I understand is they are going to take an average over the 3 years. So in that case, they will be adding year 1 to year 2 to year 3, and then dividing it by 3, which is a simple average calculation. So that is my understanding of how it will be calculated.
Yeah. The people who were saying they've only been in ADI for a short while, yes, sadly the case is that you are not eligible for this particular scheme because you have not submitted trading accounts to this point, or you don't have at least one full year from 2018 to 2019. So that is the set of accounts that they will take as your first year, 2018, 2019, what you should have filed in 2020 if you'd had a full year in those trading years. Just to reiterate, those who have more than 1 year, it will be taken on an average of your 3 years. So unfortunately, no is the answer. You're not eligible for the scheme if you don't have at least 1 year's accounts. We will go into in a moment what could be usable for those of you who have got less than 1 year. And I'm afraid it's not just a payout, it is actually in the form of a loan. A question from Nick here. What if you only started instructing April 6, 2019, previously been employed and under PAYE, so have filed no tax returns yet? Same issue, I'm afraid, Nick. We can't tell you good news there. You won't be eligible for this scheme. So people also ask about this one, about the eligibility around if you have earnings from other sources. Now, what the scheme has said so far is that your self-employed income, and that doesn't necessarily mean just from your ADI business. Some people have other income as a self-employed person. Could be you're a buy-to-let landlord. You could have other work in other spaces. It is your self-employment income must be more than half of your earnings. We have some members who have pension arrangements that they're already drawing down, and their pension payment is more than half of their income. That can affect eligibility quite seriously. So Rachel, if your other self-employment income is in genuinely other areas of self-employment and you're trading, then it could be that income is taken into account. Your earnings from that weren't sufficient, then you can add in something as long as it's a genuine kind of trading income.
Yeah. So the case where it's unfortunately not very helpful is, say, if you're semi-retired, if your pension income is more than 50% of your total income, so your trading profit were less than 50% of your total income because you have a pension that's paying out, then that would not mean you're eligible for this scheme, unfortunately.
So Martin's got a very specific question here as well. Martin, don't mind me calling out your personal circumstances. He began to take a company pension, so he's of his current income, and then after 28, does he not need to worry about that? So he started to draw on his pension at some point during his 3 years of trading.
Yes, that's unclear, I think, because he would have the appropriate tax returns for making a claim, but I'm not sure he would be classed as being eligible if more than 50% of his current income is coming from non-trading activities. So you'd need to check that directly on the gov.uk website, use their eligibility checker, and see what comes out. I think it may fall foul of these rules.
So has anybody, just going to have a quick yes or no, has anybody actually tried to go through the process yet with using the eligibility checker? Because we've got some person who works with us here who is working as a self-employed contractor. So they went through it to see for their personal usage how it would work, but also for us to test how efficient the system was and what kind of output that it gave. And all that you would need to do to use the eligibility checker, and I would urge anybody who hasn't done it already to do it now. You don't need to wait until the 13th of May to use the eligibility checker. You can go in there now. And we've actually, on this slide here, we've put the link to the HMRC website, which will take you through to the eligibility checker. All you need to do this is you need your UTR, your unique tax reference, and that is on most of your tax returns. It's not your gateway account number. Don't use that. It's actually your UTR, and you also need your national insurance number to hand. Now, if you click on that link or you copy and paste it when we send you the presentation and go through that process, it will give you a date on which your claim can be made. Now, at the moment, HMRC are saying they will contact you. Do not contact them. The date that your claim will be processed from, the date they give you in the eligibility checker, is the date that they will start contacting you by email, letter if they have to, and text. But it's our viewpoint that they're taking this system online. So a lot of what they do will be email and text correspondence. One of the things they ask you to do when they go through the eligibility checker is update your contact information in your gateway account, because that is the information that they will use to get in touch with you about your claim. So it's a really important job now to go into the eligibility checker, update that information. The eligibility checker, as it sounds, will also tell you whether you are eligible or not for this scheme. If it is a no, it should explain to you why you are not eligible at all. So this is something that we need people to start doing, just to check whether that's an issue or not. I'm just going to dip back to the questions for one moment. We have someone here who was ill, off work for 13 months in 2018, 2019 with zero income. Can I ask them not to use that 3 years accounts, that year's accounts as one of my averages?
I don't think so. I think they have a systematic approach, which is if you file tax returns for those years, they will average them.
So sorry about that. Paul, I'm going to come back to yours in a moment when we actually talk about the furlough scheme. Paul's a limited company, as actually quite a few ADIs are, and believes he can furlough himself as a director, but having difficulty. We'll go back to that one in a moment and answer that. Is there any more questions on the self-employment support scheme, or kind of points that people wish to raise? And Mushtaq, I'll also raise the question of how do limited directors tap into some company support. So eligibility checker, just go through my checklist of things to tell you. Go and do that. It'll give you the date from which your claim was made. Expect not necessarily to be contacted by a human being on the phone to most efficiently process the massive number of claims like this. They will probably do something by text or email, letter if people need to communicate by that manner. And once you're given your date and your claim is processed, you should expect the payment to be in your account within 6 working days of that. The earliest payments are expected to be made on the 25th of May. So let's go through that. The other points about this is you can be working and you can still apply for benefits such as universal credit and still receive this grant. So it is not a case of you as soon as you get this grant, you have to pay back the universal credit, or you've got to stop working. The government is fully aware that people are trying to do everything they can to keep their boat afloat at this moment in time. So they are allowing you to claim universal credit and also have a job as well, or be back at work in some way, i.e. you're doing some essential training as a key worker and you're generating stuff into your business. The other key question we get is, do I have to pay the grant back? No, it's not a loan, it's a grant. So you will not have to pay it back. People have also said, but it asked me to commit to the fact that I will continue to trade throughout 2020-21. That is not you signing in blood that you will have your business training. It's your intention to keep your business going. They want to see that you intend not to take this grant and then just close down your business. If your business does not survive for any reason, or you decide to go into another form of employment, they will not be pursuing you for this grant to come back to you. One of the reasons that they're taking the NI and the tax out of it, that's how they kind of get something back into the coffers from this system, but they won't be chasing individuals down for this money. Have I got that right, Dean?
Yes, and it also also equated against the furloughing scheme where people are paying on PAYE, you're paying tax and NI on their income as well.
Yeah, so the government can get some of that back in some way. So we can come back to this subject as questions emerge. Andy, the date we were given, you'll be contacted by the HMRC. Yes, that's true. They don't want you to contact them. Being completely honest with you now, if HMRC has to deal with loads of phone calls that are just queries asking when they're going to call them, the same personnel will not be able to get on with processing these grants. So although we're saying they're going to an online system, it still needs the people at HMRC to do the calculations, send out the communications, go through the system. If they're inundated with queries and calls, that is, a resource that can't be used for processing the claim. So yes, when you're giving your date, wait for them to contact you. If that advice changes in any way and we find that you're supposed to contact them, we will be the first to alert you. But that is the advice that's being given out on the gov.uk website. The link that's in this email, and if you're a DIA member, obviously we've been sending out lots of emails giving out financial advice through the whole time of this crisis. Last week I wrote one which told you all about this scheme and some more links to it, and the eligibility checker. If you go on the gov.uk website, not only do you get access to the eligibility checker and more information about the scheme itself, They also give some useful examples about how the tax returns are used, how they make the average calculations, whether things like personal allowances are used or not. They've got quite a lot of kind of case studies on there, which will help you find your way through that one as well. Now, we're going to talk about something now. And as I said, I'm happy to skip back to the self-employment income support as we go. So keep your questions going. We're going to come back to now another scheme that's been put in place, I think from around about the start of May was when we started the business bounce back loans. I wrote to members about this scheme last week. I've done a video about it as well. Again, if you go on gov.uk and you also go on that businesssupport.co.uk, which is a government site as well, it will talk about the bounce back loan. Martin Lewis has also done quite an extensive briefing for small businesses on this. This is, if we're being cynical, what the government is starting to push small businesses towards as they start to edge away from giving things like grants in the long run of this crisis. Do you want to take people through the bounce back loans, Dean?
Sure. So this is a loan to businesses to enable them to continue to work. So the use of proceeds are for any business purpose. That could be paying wages, paying staff. So it's not necessarily intended to be used to do up people's houses or other non-business related items, but obviously for ADIs, if they wish to get a new vehicle, whatever, that's obviously a business purpose. So their loans are between £2,000 and £50,000, although limited to 25% of your last year turnover. So if your turnover last year was £100,000, say, you'd be limited to £25,000. The average so far, according to the FT, has been £30,000 loan on average. It's actually quite an attractive loan scheme. Obviously, it's repayable. It's a loan, which means it is repayable. So it's not a grant. You do have to pay it back, but it is on quite favourable terms. So the government's paying effectively the interest for the first year. So there's no interest payable for the first 12 months, and the lenders don't expect any repayment of the capital either in that first 12 months. The interest rate is fixed throughout the loan at 2.5%. So that's quite an attractive rate of interest to be paying on a loan compared to other sources of funding that people can usually access, which would, for a credit card could be 15, 20%. For sort of payday style lending could be 50%, 100%. So they could be really expensive compared to this 2.5%. The government's guaranteeing the lender for the whole of the loan. So there's no security required from the person who's taking the loan out. The repayment of the loan is over 5 years, starting in 1 year. So it's effectively repayable from year 1 till the end of year 6. So it's a 60-month period to make the repayment over. And you can repay the loan at any time without penalty. So that's also quite an attractive feature, that if you take this money out, for example, you could keep it in your bank for 12 months and then literally pay it all back if you wanted to. So it's a very flexible and useful way of accessing cash in the short term to support people's business needs.
So for those who are limited companies, this is really in a way what the government has introduced to help you guys if you're unable to access anything through being on PAYE or obviously not through the self-employment scheme, because
this is available for both self-employed and limited companies. So as long as you're operating a business, whether you're a sole trader, partnership, or a limited company, you're able to access this scheme.
Yeah, so Darren, in answer to your quick question here, you're receiving your universal credit. Can I get any other help? Yes, you can apply for this business bounce back loan. And as we're saying before, this is very cheap debt compared to other forms of lending that you would traditionally tap into. This is the government helping people access debt. We realise. Yeah, we realise that not everybody wants to use debt. Some of you have managed very well to not have debt in your lives for a very long time. So it can be a bit of a point of nerves suddenly having to have debt. But we're in a necessity situation now. And if you can access it at such a low rate of interest, you don't have to make any payment in the first 12 months, year 0, as we call it. From years 1 to 6, the payment is 2.5%. You can apply for this loan and still apply for universal credit and receive it. You can have a part-time job and receive it. You can go back to the business of being a driving instructor and receive it. It's not impacted by your income. So we think particularly for limited companies who may be struggling, this could be a good thing to access. We also think that for the typical sole trader, this is cheap debt that you could access, and maybe even consolidate some other business debts you've got to a cheaper rate.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's obviously worth bearing in mind that this is a loan, and obviously loans are repayable. So you need to understand and check, in your opinion, whether it's affordable for you to repay, because this is a liability that you are taking on to repay. As with any debt, so debts like fire, it can be very useful, and if it's well managed, it's useful, and if it's badly managed, it can burn you. So you need to use it appropriately and affordably.
Yeah, but if somebody took out £10,000 over the term, the repayment would only be £640. Is that right?
No. So whatever you borrow, you need to repay, and you're paying interest of 2.5% on that. So if you borrow £10,000, for example, well, let's make it easier. If you borrow £12,000, your example is better. £10,000 actually. Yeah, you would be paying that £10,000 over a 5-year period from the end of year one. So you'd pay nothing in the first year at all, no interest or fees or capital to be repaid. And then from the start of year one, you'd be paying £2,000 of principal back a year, so that over 5 years, you've repaid £10,000, the amount of the loan, and you'd be paying 2.5% interest on that loan each year. So on £10,000, you'd be paying £250 of interest.
I think what we'll do...
So the total interest, obviously the balance goes down, so the interest goes down. So you wouldn't pay £1,250, you'll pay a lot less than that in interest over the life of the whole loan.
I think what we'll do is we'll ask Dean kindly, or our other chartered accountant who's going to be on this thing with us, if they can actually do us some sample calculations, because I must admit I struggle with this one. So I think sometimes to see an example calculation of how it works on paper helps us how we apply it for our own.
The key thing to remember is there's nothing to pay in the first year, but after the first year, you need to start repaying the loan. So over 5 years, however much you've borrowed, you're going to pay 1/5 of it back each year. Plus, there's a small amount of interest, 2.5% on the amount borrowed payable.
So that's the loans in principle. Louise has just said that she applied for one yesterday. It's a very simple form and application. I think they've already paid out or received grant applications for about £5 billion worth of funding. So a lot of people have taken advantage of this. The caveats I'm going to put on this is, we sent out an email which lists the benefits of this loan scheme and how to apply. It does list the high street banks that are offering it. So the loans are being offered via the high street banks. You don't apply to government for them. Now, one of the problems with this, however, is that some of the banks offering it are insisting on you having a business account with them, or they won't process it. And I know that Lloyds has popped up on our radar as one that's insisting on that. Others, however, like Barclays, are willing to take you on as a new business account customer. Now, that might take some time to set you up with your new business account and then apply for the loan. So if you don't have an existing business account right now with one of the high street banks, I'd investigate that, because if you don't, it might stop you being able to access the loan. And also, if you do need to set a new one up, it might take some time for that to happen, which will obviously delay your process in applying to the loan as well.
So a few more questions going in. Ken asks, I'm furloughed and receive 80% of my salary. Can I apply for a business banking loan? I believe so. I think as long as you're operating a business separately from your PAYE scheme, then as long as you're taking responsibility for the loan, I don't see why not.
David, is that if this is a question related to if you're part of a franchise, can you apply for the business bounce back? Like, yes, you can, because you're still running a business of your own, regardless of whether you're paying a franchise for some of it. Debbie, hopefully we cleared that off. It's via the high street banks. In an email I sent to members, we did put the list of banks. If you're not a member, you can send me an email, Carly Brookfield, CARLY, brookfield@driving.org. But remember, I'll have your details then, so I might just be getting you to be a member. And I will send you the links to all the information that we've actually got so far.
Ray asks, what's the evidence of turnover? Is it your tax return for 2019-2020? We believe so. It's not absolutely clear, but that's what our expectation of what the level of turnover would be. Paul notes that he's already applied for the loan and it was paid within 24 hours via Lloyds. So it's obviously it's up and running. and available to people now.
Yeah, I mean, we have the majority of people who have applied have had a fairly smooth process with this one, and they've got their funds quite quickly. The bumps in the road have come from people who weren't an existing business account holder of the banks that refuse to lend to those who aren't their account holders. But as I said, I think Yorkshire Bank, Barclays Bank, and a few others will take you on as a new customer, but you need to factor in the time to get your account up and running into your application process. So if you're desperate for that money, but
there's a list of accredited lenders on the British Business Bank website. So if you go to the British Business Bank and look for accredited lenders, you'll see who the providers are. It's most of the high street banking names, though. So
Emma, yes, you can use the loans to pay your car off if your car is used for business purposes. So if you're talking about your training car, that's fine. We were on a Zoom conference call with North Staffordshire ADI Association the other day, and one of the guys there said, "Isn't this a good way of consolidating some of debt? Because if you've got debt in your business, you're going to be subject to the vagaries of interest rates, particularly as we enter a highly recessionary environment after the crisis. In fact, we're already in that environment. So if you have got any debt in your business at all, and also when we go into the managing your personal finances in a moment, you are exposed to that varying and swiftly climbing interest rate situation. So fixing your amounts of interest now where you can, switching credit cards, switching loan providers, switching anybody who's charging you a high rate of interest or it's going to be variable is a really good idea.
Yeah, it's sound financial planning to sort of consolidate all your debts into the lowest cost of finance available to you. So given this is available without any payments for 12 months at a fixed rate of 2.5%, which is very low, it's a very attractive scheme to bring any other higher cost debt together into one loan at a much lower rate that's spread over a long term of repayment.
Louise notes that her bank isn't listed on the government website, but Co-op is offering the loan. It might be as well to check that link that I put in the email last week, which actually takes you to Martin Lewis's Money Saving Experts list of banks, because that seems to be A, it's a fuller list of the banks, and B, it tells you what their attitude is, whether they require you to have a business account or not. But I'll try and get an updated list today and get that out to you if you're a member. There we go. So we're just going to nip off the business loans for now. The coronavirus business interruption loan scheme has been a tricky one for people because, as I see it, and you can validate whether I'm right or not because you're more expert, I don't see this fitting the typical ADI model.
Not really. This is really geared to much larger businesses. I wouldn't spend much time on this. This is really for people looking to borrow £250,000 to £5 million, geared towards companies that need to access short-term funding for their business needs. It's a similar kind of scheme where the government's guaranteeing only 80% of the loan and paying the interest and fees for the first year, and then that business needs to repay the loan over time. But it's definitely geared at much larger businesses than most ADI operations would want to access.
Yeah, because I've struggled to see the benefits of applying for this at all, because I don't actually think most people will get it. And it's actually quite a torturous process by the looks of it. It's been quite unclear whether you get it from a local authority. British Business Bank, I know, is administrating it, but it's not the
it's
easiest.
It's really geared towards companies that are looking to raise large amounts of money.
Okay, so if anybody's got specific questions on that, you've got my email address, or you can email support@driving.org, which I also, with the rest of the help desk, look after. So we can pick up those if you have got that type of business. That's probably the larger franchises that will probably be looking I mean, the very large franchises in our space. It wouldn't be the smaller guy, it'd be the AA, BSM that might be tapping into that kind of loan. So the business bounce back loans are really the better option for limited companies who aren't getting much elsewhere, but also individual sole traders who either want to consolidate some business debt, look at buying a new car, or I have seen instances where actually you can use it to pay salaries. If you can say that
you can pretty much use it for any purpose that's needed for your business. So whatever that might be.
So if you have to pay any salaries in your business or your income, you're paying yourself, you can use the business bounce back loan to pay yourself as well. So don't think it's restricted to an asset. You are your biggest asset. So it's not just like metal and things like that. Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, there are some limited company directors on the webinar today who are asking the specific question about, what happens with them. Can they tap into the scheme at all?
Yes, you can. You can furlough yourself as a director. You're still able to make corporate decisions that are necessary without actually being considered as working. So the same as any other staff member, you can reclaim up to 80% of whatever you were being paid, up to £2,500 at that point, whilst you're furloughed.
Okay, so it's not necessarily ideal for some limited company directors because you might be putting a very low amount through PAYE. But if you are putting anything for yourself through PAYE, you should talk to your accountant about how you access this scheme, because something is better than nothing. And again, really sorry, it's not my fault, but I do feel bad that there isn't anything for those of you who don't PAYE and it's purely dividends. The only option we can offer to you there is to look at the business bounce back loans and use that to pay yourself an income or help you manage any business debts at this time. So I'm just going to quickly nip to the questions and see if there's any specific questions about the furloughing one. Okay, we just Ken's reiterating that you can receive you can apply for the business back. We're assuming when you say you've been furloughed, Ken, that you're actually a director who's furloughing himself. If that's the case and it's your business, then you can apply for the business bank loan. If you're an employee of another business, then it's not your business you're applying for the loan on. That might be a bit more fraught, mightn't it?
I think as long as you're operating a business, you can apply for a business bounce back loan.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Both.
So that's the coronavirus. Again, on businesssupport.co.uk, and it's also .gov.uk, also on things like Money Saving Expert. We're not just deflecting you onto these organisations because we don't know. The reality is that they deal in financial advice every single day, organisations like that, and they're very, very good at disseminating and cutting through this information and putting it in layman's terms as well, which is really important to all of us. The other things that the government has done, as well as make pots of money available, either as a loan or a grant, is helping us with tax payments.
That's right. So this is for specific to VAT. So if you are VAT registered, then you're able to defer any payment that was due between 20th of March and 30th of June this year up until 31st of March next year. So most ADIs probably won't be VAT registered, so it won't be applicable. But if you are VAT registered, then your next payment can actually be deferred for potentially up to 9 months.
And those who will fall into the VAT category are probably more likely to be the limited companies.
Exactly.
So then you should seek advice from your accountant on this one. The other big thing that a lot of tax advisors are saying is...
Well, this is actually automatic. You don't need to apply for this. It's actually just applied by HMRC. So if you are supposed to pay VAT, they won't be chasing it for the next payment. Just if you are paying by direct debit, you cancel it. If you pay yourself by bank transfer, you just don't need to make it for this quarter. Yeah,
it's an automatic process. Yeah. But the tax advisors are saying, don't just bank that money in terms of thinking you've got it there.
It's a deferral.
It's a deferral. You'll still have to pay it. Yeah. So if you can afford to keep it to one side for your VAT payment that's due in January now, then you need to make sure that you...
Yeah, it's only a deferral. It does need to be paid. So they're not giving it you back and it's not cancelled. It's just saying instead of paying it now, you can pay it later, but it still needs to be paid.
Yeah. So that the advice is just to make sure that you still have that as a contingency ready for January. Deferring self-assessment payments, that's been deferred as well?
That's right. So there is, if you're due to make a payment on account for self-assessment in July, you can also defer this payment again until January next year. So you're getting sort of 6-7 months leeway there. It still needs to be paid. So it's not waived. You will need to make that payment in time. So it's not giving you the money back. But they're saying there's not going to be any penalties or interest for people who don't pay the payment on account in July.
The deferment is optional. So again, tax advisors are saying things like if you can make your second payment on 31st July, you should, getting it out the way and knowing that's not another outgoing that you've got, or make sure you can ring fence it. Now, HMRC, regardless of this crisis, do have a help to pay scheme where they will help people in extreme situations who cannot afford to pay their tax bills stagger the amount that you pay across a longer period. I believe that is still going to be in place despite all this other help and will continue to be in place. We may see more help with paying your taxes and staggering them some way, but don't bet on that and make sure that you have the money available when you're supposed to pay it, rather than thinking that, I've got some money back or I don't have to pay that, I can use that in the meantime. So that's on the, I'll just check back, see if any good questions on that, because I know I find tasking even. Okay, so why have government discriminated against limited company directors who are not on PAYE? What's the logic behind it?
I'm not sure what you mean there. So limited company directors can be furloughed if they're on PAYE. If they're not on PAYE, they would presumably, unless they're just paying dividends, then there isn't much opportunity there. I suppose their logic is thinking that if somebody is only reliant upon dividends, they don't need to have a regular income. They're picking and choosing when they take money out of the business. So they probably think that you have more financial flexibility than most employees or self-employed people that need regular income. So that's probably the reason why they're not offering anything for people who take income as dividends only.
And also, I suppose, with the government's perspective, in terms of safeguarding the income that they derive from tax and how it's used, they're looking at who is actually paying more into the taxation system than
possibly. Yeah, that could be it.
Yeah.
Ken asked about corporation tax. Corporation tax is generally able to be deferred. You need to speak to HMRC and agree that, but I understand there's a lot of flexibility and willingness to defer corporation tax payments by HMRC. So do get in touch with HMRC and talk about that with them.
So whilst I say don't be ringing them about the self-employment income support scheme, because that particular team is focused on actually operating the scheme, HMRC does what it's a bit like, not call your GP because you think they're too busy when you've got a genuine healthcare issue. You still have to call certain government bodies for help if you need it, and don't not do that because you think they don't want to be bothered. The sections that deal with things like corporation tax, VAT, and all those queries are still operating. They will still take your calls. There may be a bit of a queue,
but it's quite complicated. Because, for example, the VAT deferral is an automatic scheme. You don't need to do anything for VAT deferral. Corporation tax isn't necessarily an automatic thing, so you do need to contact HMRC. So unfortunately, it's not straightforward. It needs to be in relation to which one. I think for the bounce back loan, there is a cut-off date. I think it's 9th of July that you need to apply for. So Paul's asking when that needs to be applied. I think it's 9th of July.
I'll be doing some updates on this, Paul. So I will try and include things like cut-off dates in my emails about that as well. But 9th of July rings in my July itself.
I'll check.
Yeah, we're checking that as we're on now. Mushtaq, in terms of your question, obviously I've spoken to you on the help desk before. It may be that you need to speak to an accountant about your individual circumstances in terms of the fact that you take more dividends than, or you don't put what you earn through PAYE. They may be able to help you with how you tackle your individual issues. Okay, so that's help with tax. Now, another area we've had massive amount of questions on is applying for benefits. So bounce back loans, self-employment income support scheme, you can tap into both of those things and also apply for universal credit. So another measure the government has put in place to help through this period of uncertainty around income is to allow self-employed people to apply for universal credit in a way that they've never been able to do that before. So if you can, but now the one thing I'm going to say off the top about universal credit, I've seen an awful lot of comments saying it's a pittance. Why would I bother applying for it? One of the ways I'm asking people to think about it is this. It's better than nothing. It can be up to £500 per month coming into your bank account, which is better than nothing at this moment in time. If you were to combine that 500 or so pounds with some of the other financial measures, it really would be a buffer for people at that time. Now, putting to one side the business bounce back loans and the self-employment income support scheme, if neither of those is going to work for you, universal credit has to be something that you explore if you're not intending to be able to earn any income from a part-time job or a full-time job or going back to training at some level in the foreseeable future. If you were to combine universal credit, for example, with doing some of the things that we'll mention in a moment about taking a payment holiday from a lot of your regular outgoings, but also doing something like taking advantage of the interest-free overdrafts that a lot of banks are offering at the moment, it would give you a buffer of up to £1,000 a month in some instances, because you would have up to £500 with some banks in terms of an interest-free overdraft, and the £500 or thereabouts of universal credit that's available as well. So again, I can understand it's a very personal thing about whether people apply for universal credit. Some people have never used our access benefits in their life, and it might be something that they're not comfortable with doing. But I would encourage people to look into having that support, because the government has designed it so that support is there for self-employed individuals at this moment in time. You're not taking something that nobody thinks that you should have. And they obviously have done the calculations that the system can withstand the increase in applications to that benefit without disadvantaging those in society who are already using this benefit in the normal run of life. With universal credit, you can work part-time, you can have savings of up to 16,000, and you can still also, as I said, apply for the self-employment income support grant and apply for loans such as the bounce back loan scheme. Again, what I'm going to do today is, as well as that little calculation about the bounce back loans and what the interest might look like on them, I'm also going to give you a table that I found which shows the typical universal credit payments that are made to a single person living in a single person household up to a couple who are cohabiting as well, because the payments do differ in terms of your situation.
Just going back to Paul's question about the date for the bounce back loan. According to British Business Bank's website, the scheme is apparently open till the 4th of November 2020.
Oh, so that's better.
And the government retained, that's the initial period, and the government retains the right to extend it if necessary. So at the moment, it's open till the 4th of November.
Yeah, so that obviously they're thinking that business bounce back, it's not going to happen as soon as we say you can all go back to work, there's no COVID-19 risk anymore, which is not going to happen, and B, not practical. So they're extending it to November because they know that the turbulent period is going to be after lockdown is eased and as you try and get to recovery, and that's why they want to give that financial support. Julie, just going back briefly to the self-employment income support scheme, tax and NI already been deducted. I think the NI is being deducted, but I think the tax is actually being done off your following year's tax return, as I've seen it for the self-employment income support scheme.
I am not sure about that, to be honest. I'll need to check that.
Yeah, we'll check that. But as I've seen it so far, I think the NI is coming out at the point at which they pay. But previously we said the tax was going to be taken out before the grant reaches you, but we've received contradictory information that actually the tax will be taken out at your next tax return. So let us seek a clarification on that from HMRC and get that to you. Graham, yes, you can get universal credit in addition to the grant. It's not deducted from the grant. The grant is completely separate. Again, government is aware that you're going to tap into all of these things and has not put that exclusion in there. They want to be able to help stabilize people's incomes in many ways as they can. So again, to reiterate, you can apply for the self-assessment income support grant and receive that. You can apply to the business bank bounce back loans as well as the income support grant, and you can apply to universal credit. So there are 3 pots of money. Obviously, some that have a repayment, that is the business bounce back loans, those have to be repaid, but the grant doesn't have to be repaid. Universal credit, if you with the norm of universal credit, if you start earning over a certain amount, and there are thresholds, again, I'll try and get all that information in there for you into my next email, you may have to pay some amounts of universal credit back. That's what happens in the normal run of things. If somebody gets a job and they're earning more than a certain threshold, the universal credit payment reduces, and some instances they may have to pay back. Now, the paying back universal credit normally takes place in the form of 4 months of larger payments, or if the candidate cannot afford to do that, they can pay smaller payments over 12 months. Again, things like moneysavingexpert.com, moneyadvice.org, and Citizen Advice Bureau are far more expert than I am in delivering benefits advice. This is what they do day in, day out, particularly Money Advice Service and particularly Citizen Advice Bureau. In previous emails as well, we've included a link to a benefits calculator. If you Google benefits calculator online, you'll come up with one. Probably one of them will be Money Saving Expert. God knows I wish I was on a commission from that company, the amount of times I mentioned them. But that will tell you the type of support you can expect to receive from universal credit. As I said, I'll try and get an email out to you guys as well that shows you the general table that shows what kind of person get what from it. So it goes from about £370 a month for, I think, a single person living in a single household, up to about £500 a month for cohabiting individuals over the age of 25 as well. My husband is managing to work. I'm an ADI and not earning. Can I claim universal credit? Yes, you can, Karen. That's what it's there for. Your employment has severely been curtailed, or your ability to earn income. So you as an individual can apply for universal credit. Sean, what do I do? The online system says I'm not eligible for the self-employment scheme. Sadly, that means that I think there will be some kind of process in which you can not appeal so much, but try and interrogate why you've not been successful. The website, the gov.uk website that talks about this, and the link where I'm going to send you that's got the eligibility checker on it, will talk about the reasons that you may have your eligibility impacted. Some of the things that impact eligibility are things like being part of a trading partnership can impact eligibility. Obviously, having trading profits of more than £50,000 can affect eligibility. If you did not make your tax return, or if your tax return is being contested, so you are contesting with HMRC the amount you have to pay, that might affect your eligibility. I've also been advised that parents who have had parental leave for maternity reasons, having or any care leave for the period of their last tax return, may also have their eligibility impacted. So again, that's why I'm saying go to that gov.uk website. It's got some really good examples of where you not be eligible. If you're not eligible, as we said at the top, it's the business bank bounce back loans are a good source for you, and universal credit. If you were to apply for a business bank bounce back loan for a couple of grand tomorrow and get it in the next few days, and you get the universal credit payment for the next month, then that might be the buffer that you need. If you combine it with some of the things that we'll go on to next, we know it's not ideal, but these are some of the suggestions we've got to keep you afloat. You can also, in terms of the benefits, and again, this is not my area, look at how housing benefit can support you at this time. So that's why I'm pushing you towards those who know benefits inside out, like CAB, like Money Advice Service. They can help you tap into any benefit, because housing benefit has been widened as well at this time, that can help somebody in your situation, and they're better at it than I am. We don't suggest all of these solutions in isolation. We're suggesting to people that they look at everything they can do at this moment in time, and a combination of these strategies. And we've been suggesting that from the first moment that we've realized people's incomes were going to be disastrously hit. So what we said for the last 3 months nearly now is, if you haven't done already, and apologies to those who have, we're teaching you to suck eggs here. I know a lot of you have done this, but contact as many of your financial providers or suppliers as possible to negotiate a hardship solution. Hardship solutions include things like payment holidays or a deferral of payments. The kind of things that are the biggest outgoings in people's lives, of course, are mortgages. 3-month mortgage payment holidays are available. If you are having an issue with your bank with that, then you need to speak to somebody about that, because either us, FCA, Financial Ombudsman, all those kind of organisations, the government and via the Financial Conduct Authority is now almost dictating to banks that they have to give these mortgage solutions. Yeah. There are some circumstances in which a bank can still technically refuse a payment holiday, but there is a lot of pressure on the banks to pay back in a manner to the citizens of the UK what was given to the banks in terms of bailouts in the banking crisis. So there is, you know, this real burden on the banks now to do their part. So if you're having problems, either contact us initially and we'll put you in touch with somebody who can help you, or as I said, contact one of the financial advisory bodies. We've had ADIs speak to us who are in shared ownership housing. So they will have a blend of a mortgage and a rent to the housing association. What we say in that situation is contact both your mortgage provider to get a mortgage holiday, and also speak to the housing association, who out of all landlords should be sympathetic and helpful, and try and get a reduction in rent. I spoke particularly to a single father ADI who had spoken to his mortgage company and his housing association, managed to get both reduced for 3 months. He's got some part-time work, so he's keeping himself afloat by a combination of strategies. If you're in private accommodation, talk to your landlord. Most landlords are minded to give a rent reduction at this time. One of the reasons being is not just the milk of human kindness. For them to find good tenants in this market and have the hassle of doing that is not necessarily worth it, compared giving you a small reduction on your rent as well. So we suggest that you do approach your landlord about a temporary rent reduction or a deferral on that. obviously, with both of those options, there is a sting in the tail in that with the mortgage, that 3-month holiday will go on to the end of the term of your mortgage. So you'll be paying your mortgage at the end 3 months longer than you did before. There will be fees for these payments. In normal life, there is. I'm not sure that many banks will enforce those now.
Yeah, I doubt there'll be fees now.
And I do think the FCA has actually said to banks they shouldn't charge any fees.
I don't think there'll be fees, but the payment's probably just deferred. So it will be payable later rather than now. But obviously it gives you 3 months window now of not having to make that payment, which obviously improves cash flow.
Yeah. Landlords are not currently able to evict tenants within 3 months. The legislation there has been amended as part of the emergency legislation brought forward to deal with the coronavirus crisis. So,
which helps in the discussion with the landlord because they know they can't evict you for 3 months. So technically people could stop paying for 3 months and then ultimately in 3 months the landlord would be able to evict that person, but the landlord is aware that that's available to a tenant. So, they're probably more minded to reach some agreements rather than go down a fight with a tenant.
David asks on the mortgage point, he's having to self-isolate but has already had the 3 months mortgage payment holiday. Is there any likelihood that the bank will I think you should contact your lender as soon as possible, David, and have that conversation with them about whether they're willing to do that. In some instances with some banks, they will be helpful, but not all.
It's worth asking.
It's worth asking, I think. Yeah. I think at the moment, ask about anything. If you're going to get a no, you're going to get a no, but you might get a yes, and it's really helpful to you. Louise has mentioned as well that if you're eligible for universal credit, you can also get a discount on your council tax, which is a very useful point. Thanks for reminding me about that, Louise. I discovered that one the other day. So it's worth tapping into all of these things. Sean, back to you again. I've got a personal account. Can I apply for a bounce back loan? Most banks, and don't quote me on this because some may have changed their conditions because they're coming under a bit of consumer pressure for this one, are saying, no, you have to have a business account. So either if your bank, who you have a personal account, is a lender under this scheme, talk to them about getting a business account from them now. They'll treat existing customers, I think, in a better way than they might treat new customers at this time. So speak to your bank about whether they're operating the scheme and how quickly you can apply for a business account. It does make sense to have a business account anyway and have a separation from your personal funds and your income as well as running a small business. It gives you clarity of vision across what your incomes and earnings and outgoings are as opposed to your personal expenses. So I think, and if Sean, your bank, you have trouble getting a business account of, you can apply as a new business account customer to certain banks. As I said, Barclays is amongst those, Yorkshire Bank, those kind of people. But again, it'll take some time. Tracy, I'm just going to go on to actually other places you should be asking for some money breaks in terms of payments. Car loans, I'll just skip to that. On car finance, if you've got a loan, for example, car finance, the FCA has mandated providers should offer 3-month payment holidays. So if you're talking to your car finance company and they are playing silly buggers about giving you a payment holiday, you need to remind them the FCA is actually mandating that they should give that holiday now, like they have with the banks and the mortgage solutions. If you're with a leasing company, they should also give you some latitude around a payment holiday or deferring your payments as well. You might, as I said, find that there is a sting in the tail around an interest charge being levied for that, or they might charge you a fee up front. I've heard of one car leasing company active in the ADI world that initially were charging £50 a month to park your lease costs. So you were going to be paying regardless. All right, it's a lot less than the amount that you were paying, but don't expect to pay nothing with some of these organisations. So it could be over time that the FCA, looks at some of these situations and brings more of a, kind of pressure on those people. Franchises I've been asked about. I know that some of the reputable franchise operators have been offering payment holidays. Tends to be more like a month than 3 months like we have in the personal finance world. Some are offering you the opportunity to pay one payment holiday and then deferred payments or lesser payments over subsequent months. Again, that will mean that your contract in many cases will extend with that franchise. Some of you obviously start with a franchise in your early career and only expect to be in it for a short term. just be bearing in mind, if you take advantage of their deferrals or payment holidays at the moment, it will lock you into their contracts for a bit longer. So just check all the terms and conditions of those payment holidays with any provider and make sure you're comfortable with them as well. There is a particular question about franchises here, and I've been asked this a number of times now, and I can only give you my personal view on this one. If the franchise is only providing you with the service of pupil acquisition, i.e., they're not providing you with a car and they're not providing you with any other resources, I do think you do have a right to question whether you should be paying for that service if they're not providing pupils to you at the moment, or they're providing pupils but you can't take them up. I really would have a conversation with those franchises about what product or service they're actually providing to you at this time, and whether you should pay for it. Because if you cannot get the value out of the product, i.e., you cannot teach the pupil, then is the product worthwhile paying for? The only instance in which I could see it's still useful to you is if the franchise provider is saying, we know you can't take this pupil at the moment, we are locking them in for you though. We've taken the money up front for a block booking, we've attributed it to your name, ergo we're providing that service to you, and the pupil will be there for you as soon as you resume teaching. So I would try and talk to the franchises that only offer pupil acquisition and negotiate with them on those terms. Otherwise, if you're not getting pupils at all from them because they're not marketing or pupils aren't inquiring, and you can't actually teach them, it's an outgoing that you really should look at whether it's got any value to you, that service, at this moment in time. Credit cards, loans, any of those things. Again, FCA as mandated providers offer 3-month payment holidays on these. You have, in most circumstances, until 9th of July to request payment holidays with most providers. It's worth looking, as well as looking for a payment holiday. Is this the time to consolidate some of these debts and seek cheaper solutions, i.e. solutions like the business back loan or other cheaper lending that will be at a lower and fixed interest rate than some of these cards are at? So it's a time to put all finances in order, not just because you need to because it's an emergency situation, but because you should generally look at bringing down the cost of debt in your life. Tracy, I don't know whether there's lease guidelines from FCA on the payment holidays. I do know that FCA is asking them to make those payment holidays available. So I'll do a little bit more research into those. Bear in mind, the FCA and other financial regulatory bodies or ombudsmen can tell organisations that they have to do things. What is the trick is making them compliant and being aware of those who are non-compliant. That's the problem that we've got with many of these services. That it can take a long time for a regulator to realise that an organisation is not being compliant and chase them up on that. If you have real trouble with these providers, please speak to us. That is what we are there for, particularly with things like the car lease companies or products that are related to your professional services. So, please talk to us, because then we can go to them as a mediator at least, or we can raise it with someone like the FCA that we're having a problem. There are names that have popped up on my radar thus far of not operating in what I would call a very moral or very professional way. The same organisations that are not necessarily giving support payment holidays are also not extending the lease of an ADI's car and requiring them to drive the car back to them. And that was when we were in the fullest level of lockdown, which meant in some circumstances, ADIs were being asked to complete a 450-mile trip to drop off a car. So these are names that are already coming through to me as people causing problems when they should be trying to help. Okay, so I'm just going to nip onto the next slide and I'll come back to the questions. Training car insurance, if you haven't done so already, contact your insurer to discuss commuting your insurance to either laid up insurance. If you're not going to train for a while, you're not using your training car at all, apply for laid up insurance. And I've been assured that the DIA insurance provider, quote me today, are offering this solution, and most others are, like Waveney, etc. Or if you're purely using it for your social domestic use, consider changing your training car insurance, which is obviously more expensive, to social and domestic insurance. Utilities, again, going back to, there's never been a better time to look at saving some money, but this is something we should all look at on a regular basis. Look at switching provider for cheaper rates. Every little counts, to quote the famous supermarket slogan. Some utility providers are providing payment holidays and waiving fees for late payments and missed payments. So again, you know, I know some of you are still busy during this time. You're not just sat there twiddling your fingers, but find some time to be able to contact all the providers where you have a financial outgoing and see what can be done to help you with those payments. Income protection, obviously we have provided some form of that scheme. It's suspended at the moment, mainly because they're not able to offer going forward, not to existing policyholders, that your policies are still in place, but new customers, they are looking at what they actually offer. They don't want to offer a fixed price product anymore. So we're negotiating with income protection providers for a new product for our members that works better for our members, not for the provider. But if you have income protection in place, we're coming to that 3-month period now where people may have not been able to work because of the coronavirus. It's worth contacting them now to see whether they can give some assistance as well. Unfortunately, getting new income protection policies will become more fraught for individuals as we move forward. After this crisis, the providers themselves have been badly hit. So there's not going to be necessarily as many good value policies around, and also they're going to probably have exclusions in them for something like a pandemic. So that's why I'm shopping around at the moment, because we can obviously negotiate on a volume basis for something that works better and that you can tap into that you wouldn't do as an individual. This is a little bit now about starting to future-proof your income. It's not necessarily the time now, because you're not at a level of earnings that you can think about paying out more to anything, but it's when you return to a level of income, and perhaps we'll do this seminar when people are back to training, maybe 6 months down the line. We'll do a seminar on financial planning in detail, because there's not a lot of advice offered to the sector on this, unless you yourselves go to an IFA. But looking at things like pension arrangement, life insurance, income protection, private health insurance, all of those things are ways of safeguarding your income and any personal savings you've got for the future as well. So they're wise financial planning. And this pandemic has really made people wise up to the fact that they don't have enough contingency funds in their business and in their personal life as well. They don't have enough financial protection. So we'll park that future proofing maybe for a later date, because a lot of you are not going to be able to afford to take on paying pension contribution.
Any final questions?
But a note on the pension contributions: if you are paying into a pension, again, it's another large outgoings for many of you. It's worth talking to your pensions provider whether you can defer or delay your pensions contribution in this period to try and get you some more payment. I'm just going to go back to, finally, any more questions from anybody. If you pay annually for your insurance, is it worth making changes? It's difficult to see what they can do, because obviously it's more so for those who pay monthly, but it could be that you can talk to them about, could you, is there anything that they can do for next year's to retain you as a customer? I think that might be something you can talk to them about, that, you've paid them in advance. You're not going to get any deferral or payment holiday. You're a customer who's given them money in their bank up front, so they don't need to worry about you running away. I'd use it to negotiate your next year's policy more than anybody else. This one here: my husband and my 50% business partners, do we apply for the bounce back loan scheme together or individually?
Good question. I think it depends whether you're operating a partnership, in case it would, and then you would probably be applying for a business loan on behalf of the partnership, or you're operating as two individuals. I think it depends upon the circumstances. It's not completely clear to me there. But I think if you go onto the website eligibility checker, that will clarify for you. I would expect you probably could both apply for it if you're both operating a business, though.
Yeah, I've been given that impression. But maybe, Simajit, that if you talk to your bank and if they're operating the scheme, they will be able to advise you on whether you can do it as a 50-50 thing. Maggie, nice to speak to you again, Maggie. Yes, I'm trying to get an update on the income protection scheme as soon as possible. Obviously, we're entering a difficult marketplace for income protection now because of the hit that they've taken themselves, but I'm trying to get a new scheme in place within the next 2 or 3 months, so I'll keep everybody updated on that. We're coming to the end of the discussion now. Is there any further questions that people have got whilst you've got us here? It doesn't mean you can't ask any other questions. We'll take some away. We'll send out more advice. You've given us a lot of food for thought, and you can always email us at support, and you've got my email as well. But is there anything right now that anybody wants to discuss? Quick question. Okay. Go down to the bottom, I think. Right. Sorry, it just takes me some time to tab down to the bottom of the screen, then it unhelpfully freezes for me. Yeah, Paul, sorry, process for furloughing. we haven't given out a lot of information about this so far, mainly because the majority of people won't be using that scheme. But what I'll do is, can you just tap into the questions bar, whether you're a member or not, and then I can find you on the scheme, Paul. I can email you some advice about furloughing in particular. Or if you want to email support@driving.org, one of us will pick that up this afternoon and send some more information about furloughing. That applies to everybody on the chat, but if you want to just send an email, I'll make sure you've got your email address. Even if you're not a member, I will send you out far more information on that. Darren, you've just asked the $1 million question there. Do you think we will return to work in July? Okay, so I'm working with DVSA on a weekly basis. We have a weekly teleconference where we try and catch up, and we're planning all the time actually about how we can get people back to work safely. They had a meeting on Sunday night, straight after the PM speech, to discuss what the DVSA's response would be to going back to work. It's going to take, I'm going to be honest with you, and I was honest in my email to members yesterday, it's going to take about 3 to 4 days for the information to come out of DVSA. Again, I'm going to caution, don't expect them to give you a directive about whether you personally go back to work or not. The regulator is trying to play a middle ground here in supporting people who are doing things like key worker training, not saying directly you can't work, so that means that people are, not able to make the choice, but also respecting, kind of the risk that we've got at the moment with coronavirus still in our population. What is our advice at the moment on this one? Well, we are still recommending that training in vehicle should largely be restricted to key worker essential training only. And even then, we don't say all key workers. What we recommend is the risk assessment is if the key worker has an essential need to drive for work, either develop their driving or acquire a new license in a new license category, that is what we would deem as reasonable to go out and train at this moment in time. And not all key workers have an essential need to learn to drive at this moment in time. One example we had is one member saying to us, I've got a guy who works in a pharma company, so he's classed as a key worker. He wants to learn to drive because there's no public transport to his manufacturing base at the moment, yet he only lives a mile away, so he could actually walk to work every day. I don't see that as an essential need, even though he's classed as a key worker. I see a nurse who is possibly wanting driver development because they've got to now start going on motorways to get to work when normally they were commuting by public transport. I see somebody who has to go to multiple locations and they're nervous of their driving because they've never been the driver. They've always relied on other forms of transport. I see somebody who has to get a new license in a new category who is a key worker for their work and is doing commuting for work. Is that kind of key person. So at the moment, we are recommending that we should reserve any training purely for key worker training. What I will say, though, is it's not my job to tell you or DIAs whether you go out and work or not. I get some criticism for supporting or seeing to support people who are going back out there. Let me explain where I am with this one very, very briefly, because I know you came on this for financial matters, not necessarily this. I'm being pragmatic because if you tell people not to do something, and you'll find this theory in lots of areas of public health, if you tell somebody just to not do something, drives them underground and they go and do it anyway, and they do it badly or they do it without advice and support. If somebody comes to us and says, I've got to go back out there, I have no choice, I can't access any other form of finance or any other support, then I would rather they did it with some level of advice and support rather than sending them away with no advice about how to do it. So that is why we will share things like our safe trading protocols with people. It's not something that everybody supports, but I have a broad church of membership and I can't just meet the emotions and the viewpoints of one faction of that. I've got to support as many members as possible. Again, I'm also sympathetic with those people who are choosing not to train at all and will not train for a very long time. Those people should be supported as well in the same way, and given all the advice and guidance that they can about how they get themselves through this difficult period. So, our doors are open for advice to anybody who is soul searching about what they do around training at the moment. Now, if you want me to tell you where I think you sit in the government scale or phases of going back, I've been discussing this with my NASP colleagues over the last few days. We kind of see you in that group of people like hairdressers that may not go back until July because of the extent of risk that you also face. Now, hairdressers haven't necessarily got a lot of choice in this if they're in a salon, because not only are they being discouraged from going back because of their risk straight away, they're also in salons that are regulated in some way and will not be allowed to open, the physical buildings. You have a little bit more flexibility and choice in that the car itself is not necessarily being regulated. However, there are caveats, as always. At the moment, the lockdown advice on only people from your household and your family being in the car with you still holds. So if you do choose to go out and train, you will still be exposed to the police stopping you if that pupil is not a key worker and fining you. DVSA have communicated with the appeals units of most regional police forces that somebody who is able to prove they are training a key worker should not necessarily have their fine enforced. They've asked them to look at that in their appeals process. If you're genuinely training key workers, you're genuinely doing that, and you can evidence that either you're on the key worker register with us or you've got some other way of validating your training key workers. It may be that if you have a fine and you appeal it, it just falls by the wayside because, you know, the National Police Chiefs Council and others have been told that they should respect that key worker training is going on. So you might get a misguided policeman giving you the fine, but it may be on appeal, you can get it waived. If you're not training a key worker or you can't evidence in that in some way, the police can still levy fines on the fact that you're driving with people in your car and not from your household, and the lockdown measure still applies there, and that fine may stick. And again, when you get any motoring conviction, that comes under the radar of the regulator and the registrar, and they take a view on whether attracting a motoring conviction or a fine of any kind is fit and proper conduct. I think given the circumstances, there will be some leniency, but if there's a persistent offender or someone who is clearly doing things that make, you know, what they do unsafe to the wider population, their pupils and everybody else, you're putting yourself on that radar, and that is at your discretion at risk as well. On Darren, you can always ask me a question. I have no problem answering it. It's just I'm in that very difficult space that it's opinion and conjecture at the moment rather than physical guidance. But just to reiterate, personally, if I look at the guidance that's been released in the last 24 hours, I think AGIs fall more firmly into between phase 3 and phase 4, roundabout where hairdressers will go back. Sorry to compare you to hairdressers per se, you might not appreciate that, but you know, we're talking about those up close and personal risks that you place. Once we've looked at the guidance and more has come out, you know, we are asking government to give clearer guidance for our sector in particular because it's quite unique. We'll update you on that. We are updating protocols for safe training all the time. Now, the reason we have to do it all the time is, as you know, advice and guidance changes all the time. So what we're doing over the next few days, initially for members, is we're going to update the key worker training course that we do at the moment for those who want to be on the key worker register. It's a prerequisite to go onto the register. And we're going to look to widen access to our members who are not necessarily training key workers, but are starting to think about when they go back to work. So I'd rather, when you have the time to do some training now, I'd rather give you that training now than say, no, you can't have it until you're actually allowed back. I think if you're at home now, you can do some learning. You can start to think and plan about how, if and when you go back to work, you're going to change, because you're going to have a new normal. You are not going back to the training you had before. So everything is going to have to change in your business and training. So better we get some guidance to you about that now. I'll face criticism. I'll get people saying, I'm giving you too much wherewithal to go back out onto the road. It's your decision whether you do that or not. I can only give you some guidance. We're also just developing a risk assessment framework. So what it'll do is it'll look at all types of pupil scenario. It'll give it a risk rating on what we think is the risk exposure of that type of pupil or that type of training context. And it will give you our advice in an easy table of what to do given that level of risk and given that pupil. Again, we can't tell you which pupils to train and what not to train. We've got to respect the fact that COVID-19 will be in our community for a very long time to come. It's not just going to be a case of I'll stay off in July and then I'll go back and it'll all be normal. It won't be. So that's why we're being very frank and saying you need to be aware of what's going to have to change in your life, whether you go back now, September, or January next year. These precautions have to be in place. So expect in the next few days and weeks, lots of information to come across to you about training protocols, and you can watch the webinar, by the way. In DIA Academy is a free webinar on training key workers that has got some protocols in it. Bear in mind, those are being updated. That webinar was recorded 2 weeks ago now, and advice on things like PPE has changed, all of those kind of things. So that's why it's best to get the more updated. On Thursday at 11 a.m, I'll be back again, but hopefully doing less talking because Howard will be with me. And we're going to look at post-lockdown training, which will again be looking at safe training protocols for when you go back, be looking at the PPE as we understand it now that could be used. So I'll look at visors. I'll have a look at these homemade screens that range from things that look like shower curtains to the perspex screens, and I've had manufacturers contact me and talk to me about how they can make them. There are concerns about using that kind of equipment. I'll talk about face masks, we'll talk about all those things, and we'll talk about how your business is going to have to adapt to allow for these safer training measures to come in place. And frankly, some of these things aren't a bad thing. There's always been some level of infection, like flu or otherwise, in the population, and taking these precautions, regardless of pandemic, is something we should be doing to protect the health of our members anyway. So that's it for me now on that. Pete, just quickly, if both your daughters live with you, you could train them because they live in your household. It would then fall down to whether it's essential to train them at this moment in time. Now, a few days ago, I would have said maybe not, because it's not an essential journey for you to be out on the road training your daughters. At the moment, Matt Hancock was on Radio 4 as I drove in this morning and was specifically asked, has the driving restriction now been lifted and can we drive anywhere? Now, check this, please, because I can always be wrong. But in that interview, he said, yes, that means you can drive anywhere. It's unrestricted. The reason for that is because the science is telling them that the R rating is not, the rate of infection is not being impacted by people undertaking journeys by car if they maintain the social distancing measures when they're outside of the car, and if they only go in the car with members of their household and with family members. So going back to you, Pete, a couple of days ago, I'd have said, not sure. We kind of discourage parents from doing private practice at this time because it's not an essential journey unless you go to the supermarket. And even then, we shouldn't be taking more than, we shouldn't really take anybody to the supermarket if we can help it. Now, I would say if that restriction's truly been lifted, you can do it. But from a road safety professional point of view, I'd just like people to think about this. We're already seeing traffic volumes massively increasing, and that was before this latest round of announcements about easing lockdown. We're still in lockdown to a certain degree. Traffic volumes increasing with people who haven't been driving for a while and inexperienced drivers, it's going to cause some accidents in some places. We've already seen accidents per volume of traffic rise in some areas of the country, even during lockdown, as you've got improperly trained commercial drivers being given vans, driving in a working capacity, all those kind of things. So I just think we have to be cautious about going back on the road. It's not just a question of can I go back because of social distancing. It's also, putting extra pressure on our roads at the moment in time if we don't have to train. So I'm going to leave that to your own, jurisdiction, but you'll know when is the good times to do that. I've got more and more questions coming now about the whole testing and training. I'll try and answer them. If you want to stay on, and I'll answer some questions about things that aren't financial as well. If you want to toddle off because you've got what you needed, or you want to go on the eligibility check and things like that, I will not be offended if you go. I'll keep going for another couple of minutes now and answer some questions. I've got the time, if you've got the time. So I'm just going to go through your questions. Most tests have been rebooked by DVSA, were made for July. Do we think these will change again? I would say expect changes again for sure, anyway, as they work through their plans to get back to normal. However, I wouldn't expect that in every instance, because they are working hard to forecast when they go back to testing, how many tests can they do? And they seem pretty confident that when they're allowed to go back to normal testing, they will be able to manage the backlog. So if things fall in the order that they should now, then they should be able to go back to testing in July. If we keep the rate of infection down, if there's no massive spikes, when we don't go back to a lockdown measure that's more severe, we can expect tests to go forward in July. What will impact that, if there's no further lockdowns, is examiner resourcing. If examiners go sick, if not enough of them who've said at this moment in time that they'll return to the front line actually turn up, that might impact them. There's quite a lot of factors here that have to be accounted for. It's not just lockdown being lifted, it's who's back at work, where are they, and how do we use them as well. So at this moment in time, I'd say optimistically, I think testing will resume in July. but don't expect it to go smoothly, as with anything in our normal life. Sorry, Friday, Richard, very good spot, is the webinar on post-lockdown training. Yes, so I'm confirming that, Dawn. That's my fault. It's because last week we had to do the Friday webinar on a Thursday because of the bank holiday, so that's why I'm getting confused. Pauline, sorry, you just lost audio. I think, is that it's standards checks. The standards checks, right, so this is the message I've got from DVSA on this one. Do not expect your standards check to not happen this year. Do not be complacent and think they won't get round to me, so I'm all right. That is the message that they are sending out through us. Whilst it still may be that some people could find their standards checks pushed into next year if there's further lockdowns, for example, or not enough examiners are available, there's lots of sickness, the intention is to push standards checks back a little bit in the year. So certainly when testing resumes, the priorities are going to be the category B tests and vocational tests. Part 3s and standards checks will trail a little bit behind that. So yes, your standards check's probably going to be delayed. However, don't expect necessarily you've got off it for this year, and prepare for it as you would if it was coming on the date you're expecting it. That's the best advice I can give. So, you know, it is worth still preparing for it. Patrick, yes, I will answer the questions as much as I could. So I can't confirm when standard checks will resume. Again, it's a wait and a see, but it's just the message there about not expecting them to be cancelled completely for the year. The licenses, okay, Darren, if that's a question about why you haven't been able to get the licenses, DVLA have also said that they are prioritising vocational and medical licenses at this moment in time. So new provisional licence applications and anything that doesn't fall into vocational and medical licenses, you can expect to wait on them. So because DVLA, again, another government agency that have been caught in unprecedented times, trying to get their act together, getting their act together in some instances, but it's created a backlog. So there's not a lot of other licenses than medical and vocational that are getting through. Thank you, Anthony. HSBC are offering the bounce back loan feeder account, which I would have thought some of these banks would start being innovative to attract new customers in this one and start making it a bit easier to nab customers for business accounts that they don't have for personal accounts. So HSBC are offering a bounce back loan feeder account, which is not a business account, but it's obviously something that they've thought about that can be set up in order to receive the loan for those people who are not current HSBC business accounts. So have a look into that one if your bank is not a lender under this scheme or you don't have a business account with them, because it could be that HSBC are a little bit more agile than your own bank and giving you a business account. So the only thing with that is expect HSBC to hit you with a lot of marketing for all your other money as well, if you've got any left on that. Simon, thanks for that. Furlough scheme's been extended to October, so we'll have a look in that as well. I'll look into your logging in issue with DIA Academy, Rob. Andrew, yes, I'm just looking at the webinar for Friday now in terms of the slides. And over the last few days, because of the confusion and advice, because of the questions we're getting, I am intending to spend quite a lot of that on PPE advice. We've obviously got a load of stuff we'd already developed about how to manage the lesson, how to check in with pupils, all of that stuff. But I'm aware that, you know, people are very confused about PPE and what to use. So I'm going to be trying to give some recommendations on that as well. Any delay on the renewal of the Greenback? Mine is due to renew in June. Jennifer, we ask these questions every week. The key questions when I meet with DVSA, it gets boring, but obviously they're essential, are: will theory test certificates be extended? That is under review. I give you no expectation either way, but DVSA is reviewing the situation. But clearly it's legislative and regulatory, so it has to go through a lot of hoops if they did anything, and that would cause a problem. So don't necessarily expect an extension, but they are asking the question of, is it possible? The renewals of the green badges, again, something that they are struggling with administratively, but I will catch up with them this week and see where they're at with that, and I'll let members know. And any other questions about your licensing or your pupils, tests and things like that, I'll try and get you an update on those as soon as I have them. Honestly, they're not telling me things that I'm not telling you, really. There's some sensitive issues which are they haven't got a definitive answer, or they haven't got clearance to talk about them. And that's the only reason that we can't, even if we're consulted on them. But the majority of things is they haven't actually got an answer at the moment. So I'm not keeping things from you. It's more of a, we haven't figured out the solution yet. But please be aware, we are having an ongoing conversation. They are listening to us, consultative bodies, to get our advice. They do want to know what our members' views are. We published a survey, and it's been in most of the newsletters that we sent out in the last few weeks. That is designed to be able to collate your feedback on the kind of measures that you want to see in place when you go back to training and testing and all of those things. So do feed into those surveys when we send them out. It's not just us wanting to know out of interest. We are feeding those into the decision makers at the other end as well. So I am, Andy, I would be very optimistic about that driving test being booked in for the end of June. But you know what? Miracles can happen. So if the lockdown is eased at the end of May, start of June, and the DVSA are working on plans to be able to go as soon as they can go, it could be that you could have that test at the end of June. Who am I to say that it's not going to happen? Yeah, so what I have asked as well is, in past discussions, can in any way, there is a feeling that AGI should be prioritised. When the booking system opens up again, there has been discussion and there have been positive murmurings from their end that AGI should have priority in accessing the booking system as soon as it opens. What I've also suggested, and again, it's a suggestion, not a definite, is that it may be useful that AGIs get at least 2 weeks notice, or a period of notice, that the booking system is going to open up on a certain date. Now that works for the AGI, for the pupil, and for DVSA, because it gives you a line of sight that you've got 2 weeks to get that pupil who was test ready before lockdown, but is definitely not test ready now, back to a level where they can safely present in order for licensure as an independent driver. Not just get through the hours test, get through and be a safe independent driver. So we're trying to plan into this whole process. How do we make sure that pupils don't put massive pressure on their ADIs to get back to the test centre as soon as restrictions are lifted? We want ADIs to have a line of sight to be able to encourage their pupils back into training and back to a level in which they can confidently and competently take their driving test. So bear with us on that in terms of the planning. Okay, so would I extend the key worker register past June, July? I don't see why I couldn't, to be honest with you. It's a scheme that we're operating, so it's under my jurisdiction to extend it. We just did it initially because we were being optimists, and we hoped that we would, be through this a little bit more than we are. So yeah, we will extend it if people feel that we need to do that. But importantly, as more trainers get back to, in inverted commas, normal training, we will share the materials with from those who are not training key workers, because I think it's important that you are at least preparing yourself. It's not a green light for people to go back out and do loads of normal pupil training, but if you are going to do something soon, I want you to prepare for it and have all the advice and support you can get, rather than me wagging my finger at you and telling you can't do it at all. That's not my style, those of you know me, and I don't think that's a successful way of doing it. So I'm going to close off the webinar for now because I've waffled on way too much. Thank you so much for bearing with us today with all of our technical issues, bringing on our sub accountant there. Paul has been online. I can see him in the corner of the screen. He's just not been able to talk to us very much, but he's probably made a note of some of the questions that people have got. And together we'll try and answer those as best as we could. Normally we don't send out an email after the webinar, but we'll do that today in some form. If you are not a member of DIA, so therefore I can't easily get your details, if you again email me at carlybrookfield@driving.org, don't necessarily expect an email back from me straight away. I do try to keep on top of my emails, but obviously they're coming at me left, right and centre at the moment. I will try and send out that information along with a copy of the presentation for you. And also just to note that the presentation will be in the Academy later on this afternoon, hopefully. They do take a bit of time to upload as recordings, but they should be on the Academy, so you can listen to me waffling on again if there's anything you didn't remember. And you'll also find all of our other webinars on the on there as well. So the latest webinars we've done are engaging with your pupils during COVID-19. So keeping your pupils up to date, keeping them on board. That was a seminar that Olivia and Howard did. Risk management, which looked at the risks that can come at your business and your personal finances from all kinds of angles. It's not just pandemics that can knock you out of business virtually overnight. There's lots of other things that could do that. So we're developing a wider risk management course for people to help them mitigate those risks, because by being aware of the risks, you're more likely to be able to manage it at least. And there's this webinar, some UK familiarisation driver training webinars, the key worker earlier training webinar that we did. So you might want to visit that as well, and a whole host of other things as well. We've also put some of our online courses as free courses at the moment. I think drivers with diverse needs and medical fitness to drive are webinars that you can access. Again, very generous. You don't necessarily have to be a member for some of these things, so you can go in and look at some of those. But if you're having any trouble with those at all, just email us about that. Any questions, any advice, anything you want to discuss at any time, support@driving.org is our help desk email. On there, you'll find a blend of professionals from myself, who's more the business, finance, marketing, those kind of things, and the person who deals with the stakeholders the most, like DVSA and DFT. But there's also really proper professional people like Howard Redwood, Olivia Baldwin-Ward, and Karen Bransgrove, who are driver trainers, and they cover the spectrum of fleet, learner driver training, mature driver training, pupils with specific educational needs. If there's a question we can't answer, we certainly know other experts who can. So, it doesn't have to be a COVID-19 related question to our help desk. You can ask us about anything. Financial ones, we can talk to our accountancy experts and get you answers. So sometimes we might just come back to you with an email that says, we're just looking into this for you. And it's because we're going to go off and get you better advice than we're able to get you at that time. So thank you for joining. I hope you all remain well, and I hope to speak to you, not as much me, more Howard, on Friday, if you're joining us for that webinar. And if not, I hope to see some of you in person, hopefully later this year, when we can resume some of our conferences, albeit, I imagine, in a bit more of a kind of socially distanced session. And as soon as I said, I get any tangible guidance on returning to work for the majority, then I will definitely share that with you, and any updates on testing and training as well. So thank you very much, and I'll speak to you all soon.